Welcome to the Voices of a Stranger podcast. Here is your host, Reza Garajadaki.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Voices of a Stranger. I am super excited today because I got a really special guest, a friend I know for over 30 years, pretty much a legend back in Santa Barbara, my friend Bill Singer. Hi, Bill. How are you, my friend?
Doing well, thank you. And I don't think I'm that old, but 30 years seems like a long time.
It is a long time, and you look great. I
And
love
you,
the
you,
hat.
you are too kind. Thank you. Always been a big fan of yours. You're like the biggest cheerleader, happiest person I know. Always good spirited, and and
Very
trying to
good.
spread it, which is nice. So.
Yeah, well, so let me tell the audience why you have been invited to be on The Voice of a Stranger as one of our guests. I know Bill going back to Santa Barbara in the early 90s when I went to UCSB. Bill was a 19-year-old entrepreneur, and he'll tell you his story. But for those of you who are familiar with Santa Barbara, the campus of the University of California is about 20 miles north of downtown Santa Barbara, where all the bars and nightclubs are. And being the big party school is, sometimes on the weekends, all the students wanted to go and drink downtown. Well, the cab rides were really expensive, and a lot of people were drinking and driving. So Bill went and got a bus, called it Bill's Bus, and to this day, even though he sold the company, he was the one who started the original Bill's Bus. So for those of you who are listening, we're going to hear about his story and all the things that happened. So Bill, I'm going to stop talking. Tell us about yourself, your background, and the story behind Bill's Bus.
All right. Well, let's see. Start off military brat. Grew up in a lot of different places: New York, New Jersey, Virginia, D.C., Florida, Louisiana, Kansas, back to D.C. Ended up at school at University of Kansas for a year. Back to the East Coast, and on a whim, literally ended up in Santa Barbara. Like it was truly a bet, and ended up in Santa Barbara. Ran into a friend of mine who I knew from the East Coast who lived out there, ended up becoming roommates, and he got a DUI, and that was the inspiration for the bus. And it's it's not the best story in that we were trying to go out to Isla Vista to a party to meet these girls that invited us. So the idea was initially, hey, let's run a bus that'll go from downtown to take all these guys that want to go out to Isla Vista and party. And then, hey, if there's some people out there, we'll bring them downtown. And it ends up that it worked the other way around, and pretty successfully. And it wasn't originally called Bill's Bus. It was actually called the Bar Bus. It was
Okay.
Bill's Affordable Ride. And people just kept calling it Bill's. And so, joking around with a friend, it was like, okay, we'll call Bill's Bus. And he's like, hey, I drank, Bill drove. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right. I didn't have an ego in it. For me, what it was, I got to make a difference in the world. I got to have fun doing it. I got to make some money. And I figured, hey, it'd be great on my resume, other things in my life. And so
And you were
ended up,
19, right, when you started this?
I was 19 years old. Yeah.
And
So
that was your first venture in being an entrepreneur?
that was my first real venture other than like mowing lawns and stuff, or shoveling snow or.
So tell our listeners about, so how did you find this bus? How did you fund it? I mean, this is a 19-year-old, I mean, and you changed, partying in Santa Barbara as far as going downtown. So, a lot of our alumni or listening or people associated with Santa Barbara are dying to hear the backstory beside, how you got started and everything.
I literally started by renting a bus, and I had talked to the Public Utilities Commission, which I can tell you is at 505 Van Ness Avenue in San Francisco, California, on floor 2. They regulate transportation among utilities and other things, and I got very familiar with the code. And there was technically not supposed to be any problem with me renting a bus, charging a per head basis, and then taking people downtown. And it ends up, though, when you're doing a charter bus, you can only have so many people on it. With a transit bus, you're allowed to have more. I actually convinced a bus company to buy a transit bus for me and guaranteed that I would rent it for the next 3 years. I signed a contract,
Wow.
paid some money. And I literally, the first night I did it, I used rent money to pay for the charter. So, I mean, if it didn't work, I was kind of in trouble. So I got lucky enough that I think my rent at the time, the bus, they gave me a discount because they liked what I was going to do, keeping, students from drinking and driving. Um, they gave me a discount, and I remember, I think it was $292 for the night to rent the bus, which I wish I would have kept doing because it's a lot more expensive to run a bus than
Yeah.
it is to rent it on a per night basis.
And,
So,
and so how much, I mean, I remember having a t-shirt. I had one of your early t-shirts. I drank, Bill drove. And I used to go back east to visit my mom and my cousin in college. She was at Stony Brook, and everybody just loved the t-shirt. And there was a little cartoon in the back with people, falling out of
oh
the
yeah,
bus. I wish I still had that t-shirt. I'm really mad at myself. So tell me the reaction and how much did you charge? Was it Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Maybe initially just Friday, Saturday. So talk about
yeah.
the early days. How, and what, and some of the challenges you faced also with the city.
Well, to start off, the bus, um, initially we went to, and I had a friend helping me doing fraternity and sorority parties at one of the bars downtown called the Beach Shack. And
Right.
I was good friends with the owner. Um, and amazingly, was still friends with him. And I live in Palm Beach now, and he lived here. We'll go back to that story. But uh, what we did is we went to every fraternity and sorority and said, hey, whomever has the most members per capita on this night, and it was a Thursday night when the bus wasn't running yet on a Thursday night, you'll get a free date party at the Beach Shack on a Sunday or Monday. You'll have the whole place to yourselves. And my buddy's like, oh, that's great. But, how are you going to figure out who wins the date party? I'm like, everybody's going to win the date party. I said, because now you're going to be open. You're going to have one bartender, one like host or something, and you'll have a fraternity and sorority in there drinking. And he ended up doing, anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 every Sunday or Monday night, which paid his rent, for the building. So then the rest was gravy. And he's like, this is incredible. I want to help you more. So when I initially started, the city of Santa Barbara was like trying to figure out what was going on. And like, how is there a bus dropping off downtown and all these students going into, or young adults going into a bar? We need to get to the bottom of it. So the city actually filed a criminal complaint against me saying I was breaking the law by operating a transit system without authority. And I'm like, I literally took pictures of the side of the bus because they had a charter party permit. And there's so many convoluted laws with the PUC, but basically took pictures of it, sent it in, said it's licensed, and the city didn't care. The city's like, well, we control this. And it's like, well, no, the state supersedes it. So I had to hire an attorney, which was very expensive, fight them, and then they dropped the case because there wasn't one. And I actually at that point was just angry and like, truthfully, I thought I could do what I wanted. I'm young, I'm invincible. So the cops, because the police, they couldn't stop me by legal means, they started harassing me.
Yeah.
And I started mouthing off any chance I could get, and I'm like, anybody would stop this service. Um, I used some vulgar language, and they literally came to the school to arrest me at one point. Now, it got to be a nightmare. So I'm like, okay, well, what do I need to do? So I end up getting my own permit, my own licensing from the state, spending thousands of dollars on that process. And then they come to inspect the bus and said, well, this bus has a license. We can't give you the license. I go, well, we're back to square one then, guys, because you're telling me I have to do this, but I can't do this. So which is it? So it was just on, off, on, off. They kept making threats. And I finally went to that police officer. His name is John Thayer. I am actually great friends with him today. I know him. I know his wife. He came to my 40th birthday party. I had rented a beach house, came to my 40th birthday party. I basically made amends. I apologized to him and said, what do I need to do? And what was amazing is he went out of his way to help me then. And he's like, okay, well, let's look at this. Let's look at that. And more people tried to help. There were senators got involved, people I didn't realize, I didn't have any, direct affiliation with, came out of the woodwork to help me. And I basically bought one of the transit buses from the bus company that was renting it to me, and they agreed to sell it to me. I'm like, yeah, we'll sell it to you. From that point, I worked with the city of Santa Barbara, their transit authority. He introduced me to people at MTD in LA and RTD, and they basically let me win buses for $1. And and then I met this great mechanic who we were talking about the tires because you couldn't buy bus tires, you had to lease them, and it was so expensive. And I said, hey, why can't I use truck tires? He's like, well, we just have to retune the engines. And they were called Detroit Diesel Electronic Controlled. They're Detroit Diesel, what are they called? They're called DDEX. And it stood for Detroit Diesel Electronically Controlled engines. We tuned the engines. I was able to put truck rims on and then able to buy tires for like, $150 a piece, which was amazing. At that point, I mean, that must have been like year 2 where things finally started grooving, and they gave me permission. I had figured out the insurance thing because I couldn't get insurance either. That was a crazy thing. One, I was underage, so I couldn't be insured. I could not legally drive the bus until I was 26 years old, because you have to have a commercial driver's license for so long. And then the insurance company didn't want to take the risk. So I begged the insurance company to have their underwriter come out and look at the operation and showed, and to correct you, it's about 13 miles from UCSB to downtown Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And I begged the underwriter to come out and convinced him, and they looked at the operation and go, wow. And they're not worried about anybody drinking and getting on the bus and after being inebriated because there's no third party liability. They're like, there are no cars on the road. I said, exactly. I said, we make this many turns, so the risk, and he pushed it forward. So if it wasn't for that guy, I wouldn't have gotten my own insurance policy either. I mean, it was kind of amazing.
I mean, it's amazing, Bill. I mean, you're not even 21 yet, and you're dealing with these businesses and professionals, and you're just juggling different balls just to keep this thing running. At any point, did you think it's just not worth it?
Oh, all the time, all the time. The harassment, the threat of being like, I can tell you, I literally got pulled over in my car constantly by the police and stuff. And it was like every time the bus was downtown, they're like, let's see the license and insurance. They harassed me. And so I will tell you, there was a couple brilliant people. I have a friend named Britton Fisher, who's actually down in San Diego, who was my attorney. He dealt with like the minor in possession stuff and the drunk driving, and had an office in Isla Vista. And we made a trade. I put advertising on the bus, and he took care of the legal things. And he's like, you should buy a video camera and start videoing the police if they keep harassing you every time you drop off and pick up and stuff. The nice thing is the Isla Vista Foot Patrol, they were amazing. The sheriff out there was incredible. They're like, how can we help you? What can we do? Here's our direct line at night. If you need something, here's my cell phone. Here's this person. We think you're making a difference. The CHP were amazing. I will tell you, they're like, we don't pull over, young adults anymore going out to Isla Vista. So you're keeping the roads safe from us, and we're able to do other things. So that was fantastic. The city finally, I mean, it was still little things. I don't know if you remember, there was a bar called the Blue Agave on Ortega Street.
Yeah.
So there's an alley there, and it's the building, it's from Cost Plus, and it looks like a warehouse. That warehouse is actually one of the major internet hubs in the state of California. They wanted me to back the bus up into that alley. And I just said, like, I was in utter shock. I'm like, are you being serious? You want me to, corral a bunch of inebriated people or people that have been drinking, whatever, young adults having fun. You want me to corral them and not run them over when we're backing up? I said, let me make sure I get your name and whoever's name, so when I can tell the parents who they can sue from the city for telling me this is what we had to do. I said, what's wrong with the red zone here? If there's a fire, we're going to keep the bus running. Here's the emissions from, an idling bus. We didn't use any fuel. I mean, if I idled an entire night, I'd use maybe a gallon of fuel. So it wasn't spitting a bunch of emissions. You weren't polluting that much. So they finally let me park in that spot. And then the nightmare was I had to renew it like every 3 months.
That's
And it was
crazy.
just like, they just kept going through loop after loop. And then I finally said, well, the state allowed me to park here, and they're like, wow, you're generating more revenue. We do see the benefit. I had another ally, a gentleman by the name of Steve Cushman, who sadly passed away. I was good friends with his son, Clint, and Steve ran the Downtown Chamber of Commerce.
Sure.
And he's the one that inspired me to sell advertising and stuff and help me with the city and the city council and stuff to try to get everybody on my side. And eventually it worked
Yeah.
out. I mean,
Yeah.
there were definitely a lot of ups and downs, a lot of trials and tribulations.
Well,
Um,
you're a rebel. I mean, and that and a lot of these things, you have to jump through the bureaucracy, and and then everyone's like, "Oh, we always were pro pills bust," but in the, they all want to get
yeah,
credit for saving thousands of young lives, and not just Santa Barbara UCSB people, but people came to Santa Barbara to party from all different universities, and I mean,
it was
think about it,
amazing.
thousands. Yeah, thousands. Let me ask you this, Bill. Now, some of and I posted this on the UCSB Facebook pages. A lot of the alumni, some people said, I met my wife on there, and some people are like, it was the best thing ever in the world. Tell me some of the fun. Some of the guys said after you drop people off at night, you would take the bus and take them to Taco Bell or in Hollister. So, what are some of the most crazy or fun stories that you remember? Now that we
Yeah,
know
I mean,
what happened.
so the bus, I have two sisters, so the bus for me was truly like safety was a big thing. So I had the hosts. John Thayer was, educating me in some terminology. Don't ever call him a bouncer, call him a host. It's not so confrontational now. You'd make sure that a woman would be escorted back to her place so she'd be safe, because obviously that was a big issue.
Yeah.
In any college campus, any town, it's always a big issue. Women, you never wanted to see something happen. But people that were fun, and you always had these great groups of people, and I'm like, who's hungry? Because I was starving. It's like 2:30 in the morning. Everybody's sick of a Freebirds burrito, or Woodstock's was already closed, so there weren't really many
Alberto's, yeah.
choices. Yeah, so we'd go. I'm like, hey, we can go to Jack in the Box. We can go here. Who wants to go? And we'd go and get food, and
The
I'd
whole
usually
bus.
buy it. Yeah, I'd usually buy it for people. Um, on occasion, I may or may not have gotten a couple cases of beer. I can tell you one crazy story where I ended up getting invited back to a house party. Um, and one of the guys, he was like, hey, look, I'll go put the bus back. One of my drivers, I'll go put the bus back. When you're ready, just call me, dude, because it'll take me this long to clean up and do whatever. We ended up going to Isla Vista. Everything is closed. The guy from Freebirds opened up, sold me about 20 burritos. I found 2 cases of beer in some house. Some guy had a mannequin in his window of a house, and I don't know if it was on Del Playa. Um, but I ended up getting a couple bottles of alcohol. I made a deal with him, like he could ride for free forever, and ended up having a great time with a group of people. And I managed to get the food, the beer, the drinks, everything after it was closed. So it was a lot of
That's
fun.
that's that's amazing. Yeah,
Um,
some of the stories on the message board, people are like, and everyone's really excited. So what happened? So you owned the business from like what, 1993 or four? When did it start?
1991, technically.
91. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then so when I finally got permitted and stuff, I think was 93.
Okay.
So it had been running, and then got my full, the rights to do it and everything else. There were a couple hiccups along the way. I had brought in a business partner. I was getting into finance at the time, and I brought in a business partner who sadly was an alcoholic. He actually got a DUI and didn't tell me, which was disastrous. I had to sue him. It was like on and off. Um, big ugly mess. The guy ended up being a drug addict as well. I mean, there's a record of it. I'm not
Right.
violating anything. Guy named Tim Mesplou, total,
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it, total scumbucket of a human being to this
Yeah.
day. He was trouble. Apparently he was even dealing drugs. Like I got a call from the sheriff's office saying, "Hey, we think there's somebody selling on the bus," and I would cooperate with them with whatever they needed, right?
Oh,
And it ends up that there
here's
was
your partner. Yeah.
allegedly he was actually doing this stuff. He was older than me, trying to date, young,
Yeah.
21-year-olds, just gross,
Right.
no, thank you. Got that resolved, and I don't know if my timing was good or what. In 2008, it got to a point, I'm in my 30s, I guess, now at this point,
Yeah.
and I had met somebody. I'm doing more and more of the finance thing. I had an opportunity to join a hedge fund, and there was a bar owner downtown, and I just said, "Hey, do you want to take this over? I like your attitude. I like what you do." And we made a deal and sold him the company.
Good for
And
you. Yeah.
you know, the bummer was he moved the bus stop. He
Yeah.
was a worse rebel than me. He still runs it. I don't know, all the good things, all the bad things anymore, thankfully. Um,
Well,
you know,
the university got involved. I know, at some point, the student body, I guess, some of the fees went into providing some funds for Bill's Bus. I don't know if you were part of that, but the best
no,
part is that Bill's, the name still remained Bill's Bus. So the one thing
I
you
know
did,
that's the coolest thing. And it's funny, I can be, even to this day, I still, either a friend will tell me a story. A friend of mine was in Minneapolis. Uh, uh, one of the things I've done in my career, I've just been a serial entrepreneur. I used to take products into retail and had relationships with Target, Best Buy, Costco. I was friends with the CEO of Radio Shack. I mean, I know the CEO of International at Walmart, and I've been able to do a lot of things. And a friend was, one situation, I was actually in Minneapolis myself, and the girls like sees my ID and goes, "Oh, I went to UCSB. I'm getting my master's here." I'm like, "Oh," I said, "You lived in Isla Vista then?" She goes, "Yeah." My room was free at the hotel. Like, I mean, it
Bill's
was
Bus.
crazy. She's
Yeah.
like, "I'm taking care of this. I'm going to my manager now. I'm telling him what you did." Like, there were so many amazing instances. I could be at a dinner at Trey Loon or Lucky's, and somebody was there with their parents, told them about it. The check would be picked up. I'd run into people, from in San Francisco in an airport or something, or in Vegas. There were so many amazing stories. I've been invited to weddings. One
I
of my
bet.
good friends, Robert Humphreys, met his wife on the bus.
Well, a lot
Um,
of people on there said, it's going to be interesting after we post this, and all the comments. I know you're part of the groups, Party Denial Vista 80, all those different groups. And people are dying to hear this episode, but there's going to be some interesting comments.
it was kind of amazing. And I will say it was when I was, 19, 20, 21, it was mellow. It was mostly women that rode the bus because let's be honest, women are more responsible than men in general
Yeah.
at that age, and probably any age, just better thinkers. And so
You
uh,
know, it's
it
funny you
was
say that because
amazing.
I knew guys who would literally just go on the bus to meet girls. They would go back and forth on the bus. It was like, forget the bars. I'm having more luck meeting people on the bus.
Yeah, it was kind of amazing the things I've heard. And my whole thing was like, too, if you took the bus downtown, you're going to get home. Like, either whether I drove somebody myself, I paid for a taxi to make sure they got home. Like, I wasn't going to leave anybody stranded. Like, that was my whole thing. And somebody missed the bus by like 45 minutes. A little more challenging, but I have done that too, where I'm like, dude, just don't throw up in my car. Or there's five people. Thankfully I had a Suburban, so I'm putting them in the back, all the back seat. Like, just don't throw up anybody. I'll get you home. Those are the times too. Jack in the Box or somewhere else.
That's
A couple
amazing.
times I was able to get a house in Montecito, down uh, by the railroad tracks, and every now and then I'd have an after hours party at my house. Nothing too crazy, but just, just
Well,
fun.
there are people watching this, and they're like, I party with Bill's bus. They think they're watching this, and they're gonna think that. So, you know what? Honestly, but I was so excited to have you on here, Bill, because you have this big smile. And first of all, the people watching this video, I'm 5'7", and Bill's like, how tall are you, Bill? 6'2",
I'm,
6'3"?
I'm 6'4".
Yeah, so when we talked, it looked like Danny DeVito and Schwarzenegger, but you're an imposing person. Always had a strong voice, but the main thing I want to say is the impact you had in the thousands and literally thousands of lives in Santa Barbara. I really think the city should give you a award or something or some recognition. I'd love to put a plaque somewhere in Isla Vista,
Thank
and it'd
you.
be like Bill's bus started here. I think that would be awesome. So, I know some people up there too, and I think it'd be great. But thank you so much for being on here. Any words of wisdom to young entrepreneurs? I mean, you started at 19. What would you tell a young entrepreneur?
Go for it. I mean, you can make all the mistakes you want when you're young and don't have regrets. And, if you can, truthfully, you can make money doing anything, and you can actually make money doing something good for the world. I love all these businesses that are disruptors, but they have to help people too. If you're providing transportation, you got your Ubers and your Lyft. The guys from Lyft went to UCSB. I mean, incredible story, but like, how are you bettering the world? I mean, that's what I'd like to see more of. How are you making a difference? I mean, I eventually figured out, wow, this is great. The CHP told me, look, we don't get the drunk driving accidents now. We don't get the drunk driving statistics because less people are even driving now because they see us out, because now there's no college students. There's no, people going out that direction at all. They're afraid to drive drunk because of that. And I think the city was great. Like the overnight parking wasn't unreasonable. So you were like encouraged, leave your car, do something smart, because at a certain point you're not thinking about it. You're like, oh, I'm okay to drive.
Yeah, exactly.
Any entrepreneur, just go for it. And I mean, I love helping out people. So if there's anybody out there that's got a business, they've got a product, they need help with retail. I've got so many connections, and I have literally manufactured cell phones, manufactured computer tablets. I've been in
Oh,
the
I
clothing
remember.
business. Um, I'm in finance still. I'm an investment banker now. I work for a company called US Capital. I actually know the CEO from Santa Barbara and was introduced through their basically to the operations manager. She's from California. She's from Santa Barbara and knew the bus and was the one that got me basically her recommendation got me
That's
the
awesome.
job. So,
Let me ask you this: if people want, is there a Gmail account or an email? If somebody wants to, somebody wants to reach out to you. How would they get hold of the great Bill Singer?
it's funny. I did have my Bill's Bus account still. I just don't have the login anymore.
Right,
I
right.
still think it's an active server. I still kept the domain name because that was one of my things. I'm like, well, you got to buy the domain name from me. I'm going to make some extra on this.
Yeah.
I'm happy to give people my email address. Um, I would say even the U.S. Capital one's fine. So it's literally W Singer, my last name, at uscapital.com.
Yeah, and
And
I'll put that on there in the comments for YouTube. So yeah, anybody watching this or listening, you have some great stories, or you feel like Bill saved your life, which he probably did. Want to reach out to him. I'm sure you're going to get some amazing emails from a lot of people who were in Santa Barbara during the glory days. Anyway, Bill, thank you so much again. It's so great to see you. I'm going to come visit you
yes,
in
you
Florida.
have an open invitation. And it's funny because I'm going to be in Santa Barbara. I've got a lot of great friends. I've been very, very fortunate, I can say, just some of the people I've met from doing the bus and having that reputation in Santa Barbara was wonderful. That I have a friend that invites me, and I literally get to stay at his beach house, whether or not he's there.
That's
And he's
awesome.
somebody I'm going to introduce you to because I'd love to get him on your show. He's a
Yeah,
very
that'd be great.
successful writer,
Absolutely.
just a
Yeah.
wonderful human being, and so we'll see. But
All
so
right.
I
Well,
thank you
listen.
so much. I mean, for your friendship too. I mean, again, you were like the happiest, most well-spirited person I've ever met. Man, you're always like just you're good people. truly.
Thank you.
You know,
Well, we
so
connected and we're always going to be friends. So, all the listeners, thanks again for listening to another episode of The Voice of a Stranger. I know this is a little bit regional, and many people around the world who are listening might not have a connection, but I really wanted to bring Bill on here as one of my early guests. So, for those of you who lived in Santa Barbara or know somebody who went to UCSB, send them this podcast because I guarantee you they're going to be like, Bill's bus, a legend, a true legend of Santa Barbara and Isla Vista. All right, Bill, thank you so much.
thank
Welcome to the Voices of a Stranger podcast, where we amplify the extraordinary stories of individuals who have overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges in their lives. Here's your host, Reza Garachadaki, and he's thrilled to invite you on a journey of inspiration and empowerment. In each episode, we delve into the lives of everyday people who have defied societal norms and pursued their dreams despite facing adversity. Join us on the Voices of a Stranger podcast, because every voice deserves to be heard.